Did you not know that 25% of all searches on the internet search for pornography? And the fourth type of search is porn? Yes. And we think that it's all men, but women are searching as well. I've got a solution for those of you who might be hooked on it, and I'll talk about the 4 aspects or the 4 things that happen in the brain for those of you who just can't stay away from internet porn. We'll talk about it today in this wonderful book by William Avery, right here on the Sirwalterj Show. Hello everybody, Sirwalterj, the Sirwalterj Show. I'm he. It is a midday connection. It's called a book and a song every Tuesday, y'all, at 3 p.m. Central. For those out there, part of my TST, y'all, that's the Sir Tribe. I want to say thank you for your support and your understanding of sometimes I cross my I don't cross my T's all the time and dot my I's, but y'all help me out, especially those on Facebook Live. And those of you who are on YouTube, thank you. Those of you out there on SPREAKER.com, thank you. And those of you on Instagram, thank you. There's a whole bunch of y'all out there. I appreciate you. Today, this book right here is going to, bring some awareness to some of you out there who may not understand. Preachers go through stuff like this. And for those of you who understand it quite well, you'll say, amen, I know exactly where he's coming from. William Avery is the author. You can go to Amazon.com for this book called The Preacher and His Porn. It's just for $12.95. Y'all go there now if you want to. We're going to talk about this as we give a expose on the whole aspect of the addiction to porn and the effects it have on the brain. Yeah, so again, tag your friend, tag a neighbor, tag a cop, as I always say. The book is very inspiring, and it opens up, of course, with your usual dedication, the contents and acknowledgments and introduction and what have you. Chapter 1 gives us a wonderful reflection. Okay, when I read his reflection, it reminds me of some of the sounds that you might hear on TV, something like that. Here's that old song. All right, he perfectly brings us back to a place in time in his life. Okay, I think it was wonderfully written. When you get to page 2, those of you who have the book, he says, how in the world could I be standing at a place of hopelessness after exclaiming hope to others? Okay. Ain't this something? You teachers out there, you counselors, you preachers, you psychologists and psychiatrists, and all you people who are encouragers out there, how could you be encouraging people, trying to get people healed, and you're standing in the place of hopelessness? He talked about how could I be at the place of a defeat after preaching victory to others. Come on, preachers, y'all can give me some thumbs up. You understand this. And how could my faith walk be diminished and depleted after telling others to use theirs to continue? All right, man, I'm telling you, reading this book helped me understand and remember the things that I went through. This man, Avery, William Avery on Facebook, last name Thompson, his life is almost exactly a mirror of my young life as well. He talks about the innocent eyes gone bad. On page 4, I pick up where he says, you know, the funny thing, even as I write this book, he says, I still don't know exactly what my dad's job title was for the company, as it seemed he did a little bit of everything. My father did the same thing. He was a carpenter. He was a bus driver. He worked somewhere else, and I really didn't know where the money was coming in. Okay, in some way, my dad had discovered the grand old concept of recycling. I remember my father taking me and my brothers up and down the streets of Chicago picking up aluminum cans. It's like William was born and raised in my house. He says, some way my dad had discovered the grand old concept, and this would be the money-making opportunity my dad would capitalize on for years. My father did that as well. I remember the garbage bags of cans and taking it to the recycling place and only getting a couple dollars for all that whole days of work. He says, I remember early as 7 and 8 up until a senior years high school, helping my dad on Saturday. He talked about Shell Street in Little Rock, Arkansas. My mother is from Little Rock, Arkansas. My father is from Jackson, Mississippi. But again, us who had Southern parents coming up in the 1960s and 70s, we all kind of went through the same thing. He talked about his innocence, the innocent eye being open. I highlighted some portions of here because I wanted you to see what happened to him, which is a remembrance of some things that may have happened to you, male or female. These things that happened to him happened to many of you, I've heard. And I couldn't help but notice that naked pictures that the Playboy magazine was open to. I remember Playboy and Penthouse magazines, okay, passing by the magazine stand. I remember those days and wondering, because the cover was enticing enough. He says, I mean, who wouldn't notice that image? Though I knew it was wrong to look at it, everything in me was saying it was right. You got to understand, this is coming from the mind of a child. And at an early age, there was a rush in seeing naked pictures. Instinctively, I knew better, but the satisfaction of viewing outweighed all the negativity that I knew inwardly. This man was struggling in himself, and there was no guidance, especially from his father, because little boys are looking for that important guidance that will take this boy through his whole life. But when you read the book, you'll see his father, he also suffered with something else of a different type of addiction, okay? Crazy emotions running through my head as I'm trying to look at the pictures without my daddy noticing, and I'm sharing the picture with my brother and cousins, okay? He talked about the same things that I talked about that we did when I was coming up with my own brothers. He says the thrill of having this magazine in my possession outweighed everything bad that I could imagine happening to me, and I could care less about punishment. You see, the desire for this thing outweighed anything, and I'm going to talk about this on the whiteboard in a minute. I didn't care about getting caught. I had found something that had awakening something in me that I would later find would be one of the hardest things to put back to rest. Ooh, y'all, we got to talk about this. He goes further on I was about to say verse 8, but page 8, for those of you who got the book. He says, one of the traps that we fall into is premature exposure. And there are just some things that a child can never be ready for as a child. And I look at the desensed state that we have placed our children under while we have 24-hour cable TV, and we allow the TV to watch our children. We're going to bed, we put a TV in their room, they close the door, and not just the TV, but they have the internet. So they have this whole world that is raising them and pouring into their eye gates and their ear gates and things like that. And so they may be physically big and strong and developed, but emotionally and mentally they are not ready for certain things. And our parents coming up, they sheltered us, they protected us, they guarded us from these things. We weren't allowed to go over to people's homes for dinner and sleepovers and things like that because our parents protected us. All right. He talks about in this chapter, it's called Now That the Door is Cracked. He says one of the vices that I watched not only my dad, but a few of my relatives and my dad's friends struggle with was alcohol. Alcohol. Alcohol, y'all. What he says here, my dad could really put it down. Take it to the head, as Martin would say. Seagram 7 and Texas Sun grapefruit juice was his preference. He drank beer as well, but I don't remember as much beer being in and around the house. And he goes on with the addiction that his father had. My father didn't drink and he didn't smoke and things like that. But this is his relationship or lack thereof, or his memory of his father, which caused something to happen in him, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The day everything changed is chapter 2. I go to his page 15 where it says, I will never forget that day when he had to make a detour to go and check on someone that my aunt had asked us to, as it was on our way back to her house. You know, it's always that auntie's house, always that uncle's house, always that cousin's house where these things happen to young men and women, these young boys and young girls. All right, it don't always happen in the home. It happens in someone else's home, or in the basement, or the attic, or the bathroom of a church, or a restroom in the public place. Okay, it usually happens in a place of familiarity where people know you. And my brother and I, after going on one of our excursions, okay, he talked about. He says he came in and sat right next to me and just started watching TV. He's talking about this man. He says, I was in the back room watching TV. All right. And he began to really pinpoint on certain things that a traumatic person wouldn't pay attention to. You would think they wouldn't. Remember the woman, the trial of the justice who they was trying to get him approved, Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, and the woman who was talking about how these things happened to her. He raped her, and he and his friend. How she talked about the hippocampus, how it horns in on certain things. She remembered certain things about him and his friend. She remembered certain words, but she couldn't remember everything else. She couldn't remember. She couldn't remember what time she got there. She couldn't remember how she got there. She couldn't remember, but she honed in on certain things. And I think this man in his writing showed us the operation of the hippocampus. Okay, because when he talks about it, he says everything happened so fast. He got up as if he was going out because a commercial came on. He remembers these things. I remember it being an Oscar Mayer commercial. He says, and I can still hear the jingle at the times in my head. He says, I got up and locked the door and grabbed me and flipped me over so that my stomach and face were on the couch. He says, I was trying my best to scream, but his huge hands covered not only my mouth, but my nose as well. And I was trying to figure as much as I could, but I was not a match for him. He goes on. All right, I want you to read the book because he goes on into some details here, but he talks about this soap that he remembers, Coast soap. Y'all remember Coast soap? He talked about the parents didn't buy name brands. Okay, my parents didn't buy name brands. It was like Christmas if a box of Frosted Flakes came in the house. We had the Jewel Osco, Piggly Wiggly, or Winn-Dixie, or whatever your store is in your town. We had Jewel Osco. We had the cheap brands, okay, the generic brands of cornflakes. Okay, so if we saw Wonder Bread come in the house, we thought Daddy got paid, or somebody's birthday was today, or Dad was just feeling great or something. Well, did he win the lottery because Wonder Bread is in the house? Well, we wasn't used to that stuff. Okay, I think our bread was wholesome, or one of them cheap brands. Okay, so he said Coast soap. He remembered this, and then he goes into the title, in the meantime and in between time. He says, when I say that for years I think somehow God did something miraculous, in a sense covered me from a lot of trauma. That now watch this. You talk about stuff that I talk about too. I remember some of the traumatic things. I never was molested, but there were attempts of molestation on my life from the time I was a boy all the way up in college. Okay, the attempt of molestations, and the Lord has helped me to put that stuff behind me, and I thought did not tread out my path of my future. I figured I escaped that and I was fine, I thought. But I looked at the trauma and molestations from children and young adults as a pattern that they are going to go through a particular type of pattern. Traumatic people do. They go through a particular type of pattern. I didn't go through those patterns, I thought. And he brings this out brilliantly. He says, when I say that for years, I think somehow God did something miraculous, in a sense, covered me from a lot of trauma that I've come to read and study, and even experience much later than I did in the early years of my ordeal. I have often asked and questioned God a lot about this. Why didn't I experience some of the horrible effects that I've read about in others? One of the things that I have come to realize is I did. Oh man, y'all get the book and make sure you got elders and ministers at your church. Make sure they have this book in their arsenal. Make sure your churches have this book. Make it a part of your Bible study, because these are the things that y'all are not talking about. And I keep discussing these things on my show, and it gets dismissed. It is taboo. And our churches don't talk about it because it's embarrassing to the father. It's embarrassing to some of these clergy people. And they go home still struggling with this type of situation. I don't think y'all understand. They're struggling with this stuff now, which is the reason why your husbands treat you the way they do. Your husbands treat your children the way they do. Or there's an absence in this man in the house. Why? Because it's in the book here. He says, I'm going to jump to the age of 13, in which I discovered that would become my greatest battle throughout my life, and that is the discovery of an orgasm. I remember that first day. I remember the wet dream. I remember wanting more after the wet dream. I remember finding a book. You know, I remember sneaking to the newspaper stand and getting somebody else to buy the Penthouse. I remember the first orgasm, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. All right, he says, I remember hearing the term jacking off in the 6th and the 7th grade. But so naive, one of the things that we did growing up as boys that so many others do is talk trash, trashy talk. I remember being in the 4th and 5th and 6th grade talking trash, and these boys are talking about how large their penises are, and how they would palm the behinds of the girls, you know, and then necking at the locker, and we going over to their houses and watching pornography. He talked about that later on in this chapter. He says this day while winding down from the basketball game, we gathered at the back door of the styrofoam cups, getting water and preparing to make our hike to Glenview. He says, I should have known something was off when my friend invited us come to the house. Back in the day, you didn't go to the homes, okay? And I talked about that. And I'll fast forward. He talked about the old VCR. I remember those stores, those video stores. Before there was Blockbuster Videos, before there was Hollywood Videos, there were these little neighborhood stores, okay? And you went in the stores, and there was a Betamax or a VHS, and the pornography was in the back room, and they really didn't care how old you were. If you looked like you had some money, you went in that back room. Sometimes the doors slang like a salon, like a saloon, that is. It's slang like that, and you went in there and you saw X, triple X, okay, and there it was. And then you didn't bring the video to the counter. What you did was they gave you a pen and paper, and you went back there and wrote down the number, okay, because the videos were not back there. The boxes were back there, but the videos were not. The videos were kept under the counter at the store. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, and so you wrote down the video, and you went to the patron, to the clerk, and he went down there and grabbed the videos, and then you took it home, and you had a good day, maybe two, to watch it. Well, most of us boys who watched the VHS tapes, you can get about 4, 5, 6 hours on that, and that's what kind of killed the Betamax. That's some people. That's what the saying is, that the pornography industry destroyed the Betamax, because you could only get about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, one short movie on a Betamax, but the Betamax was a better quality. It would be like HD today. That's what Betamax was. VHS was longer, but when you stretch tape like that, the quality is not as good. But the pornography industry put all their tapes, their movies on there, which kind of killed the Betamax. Now, later on, they said that that's not true. That's urban myth, what have you. But many still believe that that's what happened. All right, you can Google it yourself. So he talked about those parties on the VHS. He says he put the tape in the VCR and hit play. And the things we saw on the screen were things no 12-year-old should see. He says, I have often heard it said from those who have an addiction to drugs that marijuana was often considered the gateway drug. I mean, most people who are battling addiction would tell you that they started out smoking marijuana, and I am sure that none of the people who started smoking marijuana thought smoking marijuana would lead to crack, to pills, to heroin, to addiction. But it all started with marijuana. And this same principle applied to me and the addiction, and it all started with the gateway drug called pornography. In chapter 3, he says, I'm saved now. I'm saved. Wouldn't it have been nice for him to end the book with chapter 3? I'm saved now. All is well. But look how many pages we got left. Now, I'm not going to do all of them today, but I'm trying to tell you, he says, I'm saved now. But look at all this. Apparently, saying that I'm saved now, that's a show in itself. There's a lot of folk out there saying, I'm saved now, which means all my problems are over. I'm done. It's like Barack Obama becoming president. That's it. Racism is over. There can't be no more racism. And the white people were saying that. White politicians and mayors of certain cities and commissioners was like, oh, there is no more racism. Y'all got your Negro. Okay. What do we have here? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Come on. Yep. Them old videos. All right. So he says, I'm saved now. All is well. Then he talks about coming out from among them. All this sounds good. Sounds good until you get to page 34. He says, one more hurdle to cross. But I thought he said I was saved. Though I had plenty of experience with pornography, Playboy, and Hustler magazines and masturbations, I was still a virgin. And I would say maybe 5 months before I started my church life, I had a girlfriend who from day one wanted to make sure that I lost my virginity to her. Being 16, of course, my hormones had been running wild before I got saved, and I was at the point that I thought I was ready. But deep inside, I was horrified. That was me at the age of about 15, maybe 16. I think it was 15 for me. Yeah, I remember that day. He says, I thought I was saved. That's his subtitle here. He says, I thought I was. When I first got saved, no one shared with me the fact that after a few months of fire and tongue talking, jumping and running and shouting that I would come down. Oh man, I'm telling y'all, you ain't ready for this. Y'all not ready for this book. You're not ready for the truth. You're not ready for the transparency. You're going around in a circle like the Jews did out of Egypt. Boy, did I come down hard. Don't get me wrong when I say this, and I hope those that come to know Jesus will never lose their fire and their quest and their zeal. However, the reality is in many cases we come back to reality that that a lot of times the church has not prepared us for. Please keep in mind again as you read the pages of this book that I'm sharing my personal experiences, and my experiences are not a standard for all. I'm telling y'all, you got to get the book. Let me end. It's the chapter 4, that day. It's when crack doors opened. Okay? I'm only going to give you some of the subtitles here. I'm going to go further where it says, then innocence gone. I had been able to maintain going there and keeping me clean apart from my frequent masturbating. I knew it was really a matter of time before I would slip up. My fire had fizzled to a flicker. My Bible study had fallen off tremendously, and I wasn't praying like I should have been. And all these mixed with the perfect opportunity to sin was a dangerous combination. And he goes on and on with his story. Y'all, this book right here is magnificent. You want to go to Amazon.com right now and get it. William Avery is only 13 bucks, and I would pay 30 for it. All right, I'm going to talk about this whole thing. This is called The Preacher and His Porn, and pretty much what he did was give his history or his testimony by the way the psychologists and counselors may lay out the effects of porn, especially internet porn, on our brains. Okay, the great Gary Wilson on Amazon, and he has several books on the effects of it on our brain. He talks about the dopamine. Okay, we know these neurotransmitters. Okay, I'm gonna go a little nerdy right now. Right. Keep your focus on this book here, because again, I think we can study the scriptures talk about is not first natural, then spiritual. Okay, this man went through a natural situation coming up in life, and then he ran to the spirit. All right, but we know that the flesh is warring with the spirit, and the spirit is warring with the flesh, and all of us are trying to live this life day by day, going through this type of warfare. There are 4 aspects or effects of the brain when it comes to pornography by Gary Wilson: sensitization, desensitization, frontality, and dysfunctional stress circuits. All right. The first one, the desensitization, is visual stimulus. Visual things that you see. Notice he saw pictures in the Playboy magazine, and then he went over there to the house with his friends, and then there was visuals in movie form on the VHS tapes. Since he's sensitized, or visual stimulus, to now today we have internet porn, and this porn is free, and it has a different type of effect on children today than the magazines had back when we were coming up. Okay, because now it is so many opportunities. You're at a toy store with your parents, and your parents says the sky is the limit. Well, that's what the internet porn industry and what's happening in our homes do for us. Okay, and not just children, but for adults as well. All right, your husbands or wives are acting a certain way towards you, the lack of intimacy. If he's into porn, and it's because of these 4 things that's happening to him. Desensitization is what it does is get used to it. He wants more, and more is not enough. Okay, going to orgies. You watch him. If you watch a man on porn, if he's watching it on his computer, he'll have multiple tabs up. What are these multiple tabs? They are tabs to different porn sites, and y'all know there are hundreds and hundreds of .coms for porn, but he has multiple tabs. Why? Because he's looking for more and more and more and more, and he never gets enough. All right, multiple tabs. The normal pleasure. His normal intimacy with you, the wife, okay, is depleted, is gone. You don't satisfy him as much. Why? Because there is an addiction. And a lot of times wives, they punish themselves because they feel that they're not attractive enough, that he doesn't desire her anymore. Well, it's not so much that. It's definitely not the wife, because the wife could still be very pleasing sexually. All right, she hasn't changed her movement, or she hasn't changed. Matter of fact, she might have ticked it up a little bit more, but no matter what she can do, it won't help him as far as sexually. It won't help him because he has an addiction, and you're going to have to bring a third person in his life to help him. What I mean by third person, someone who can counsel him out of this. Someone could help him. Someone like William Avery who could talk to him, talk him off the cliff, because there's some things that a person can do to kick this habit of pornography. Okay, so the normal pleasures of life, he's not interested anymore, and he don't even see the flowers for the trees. He's driving with you up and down a romantic road or what have you, and he don't even notice the birds. Okay, he don't even see the beautiful cloud. Okay, because he is addicted, and something has taken has stole this pleasure from him. All right, so desensitized. All right. The hypofrontality, y'all know about the prefrontal cortex. That right there is the CPU unit. I guess you would call this the CEO. Okay, this is the chief, the executive officer of the brain. Is that cortex? Okay, it is the executive function. It is the decision making. That front part is extremely important. Well, it gets this hypofrontality overrides the prefrontal cortex. So the normal decisions that he should be making, that is something that he was taught from a child, something that he might have learned in the police academy, or as a marketing agent, you know, as someone who worked with children, okay, someone who worked with numbers and accounted. All these things he learned in school, learned in life, is gone. It's erased. Y'all say it's called common sense, and then y'all say common sense is not that common. Well, that's what happens here. It gets affected. Porn does that. It takes that away, his thinking. And then dysfunctional stress circuits, okay, is number 4. You have a one-track mind. He's got tunnel vision. You seek and satisfy the addiction and the intense urge to soothe this addiction that he seeks. All of this happens through the dopamine because it is a pleasure. It is what's more called a reward. It's a reward. A child is rewarded for doing a good deed. A rat in a laboratory is rewarded with food when it finds its pathway through these little portals that these tests. It gets rewarded. Dogs get rewarded for chasing a rabbit or chasing a cat. He's rewarded for doing things. So that's what's happening with the dopamine. The man watches porn and he is rewarded, and so he wants more and he wants more and he wants more. And he takes that away from his wife, his loved ones, all right? And it's not just sex, but his responsibilities. He stopped paying the bills. He stopped taking out the garbage. He stopped taking her out to eat and things like that because he's overtaken with the 4 aspects of the brain to pornography. All right. So it's not you, wives. It's not you at all. It is the addiction, just like marijuana, just like opioids, just like a person who's running, he always working out and always running, and then something happens, he breaks his leg, and then he begins to go through a withdrawal. He can't run anymore. He can't work out anymore. There's some women who are addicted to shoes, and you take away their money, they can't shop anymore, so some go out and start stealing. They start borrowing money. They go to payday loans because there's an addiction, because the dopamine, they are rewarded for shopping for shoes, okay? And that's what's happening in the porn, all right, for the brain. William Avery talked about all the things that happened to him as a preacher. He said, I'm saved, or I thought I was. Why am I going through this struggle? You want to get this book here. It's on Amazon.com right now for $12.95. And I think there might be a Kindle edition. So I have Kindle Unlimited, so, you know, that's what I saw on there, all right? You want to get this, okay? All right, 30 minutes. And I thought I quit that, okay? Y'all are saying here, yes, sir, Walter, I've had to try and explain this to my wife many times. Avery Thompson is here. For those of you, the author is talking. Amen, Deborah. Set the captives free. Yes, all right? So you really want to share this. For those of you who are on here right now, the dozens of you that are here, you really want to share this. Put it on your wall right now. Y'all talk about how much you love the saints. You talk about how much you love mankind. You talk about how much you love your children and your family, your church family. You talk about it as love, but you only want to put on your social media sites funny things and sad things, and Jussie Smollett being arrested and R. Kelly being arrested. Well, do you understand? These men also are victims as well as perps, okay? Because a lot of times the perpetrator was once originally the victim, okay? and then they become what we call survivors, and then they turn out to copy what they went through. R. Kelly was molested. R. Kelly's brother was molested as well by their own sister. I think that was the occasion, okay? And so what is he doing right now? You understand? I don't know what happened to Jussie for him to need that type of attention to come up with this particular alleged story. But a lot of these men you see, look at Bill Cosby. Why did he feel this America's father, educated man who encouraged us and inspired us and taught us as children, how could he possibly leave this normal world and go out there and drug these women with the Spanish fly and take them when he can have any woman he wanted to? He could have cheated on his wife with almost any woman he desired, within reason, of course, because some of y'all women say he couldn't have me. You know what I mean? He could have had almost any woman he wanted to. He didn't have to drug them anything. He just I'm Bill Cosby, and they would have been like, yeah, okay, drop your drawers, all right? But no, he felt that he needed to do this. Why? There was a reward, because it wasn't really about sex. It was about takeover and control. You understand? So these men and these women who are being arrested and things like that, what we see today, a lot of it has to do with this. Read this young man's book, and then you'll see the outcome. Okay? All right. I hope that helps some of you. If not, well, you don't want to be helped. Hit the share button. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit the bing, the bell button, and spread the word. Let y'all know that the TST, that's the Sir Tribe. They're here. I appreciate y'all. Let's do this again tomorrow as we talk about why can't men commit. That's tomorrow, Wednesday at 3 p.m. All right, we call it Relationship Wednesday. Why can't men commit? Right here, 3 p.m. on the Sirwalterj Show. See you later.